Morning light poured through the wide glass walls of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, turning the polished floors into silver mirrors. Travelers moved in steady streams, dragging suitcases that hummed across the tiles. Among them walked Rachel Morgan, a woman whose quiet presence rarely drew notice. She wore a soft gray hoodie and well-worn jeans, her hair pulled back into a no-nonsense braid. To most people, she looked like any other passenger catching an early flight. Only a small scar across her left hand hinted at the years she never spoke about. Rachel had learned to travel light. One carry-on, one small backpack, and nothing that rattled. Her friend Laura, a college roommate who had remained her closest confidant, had insisted she accept a first-class ticket for this trip to Boston. "You've done enough for everyone else," Laura had said over the phone. "For once, let comfort find you." Rachel had smiled at the thought, but inside she felt a tug of unease. Comfort had never been her natural state. Long flights and crowded gates were fine, but luxury still felt like a borrowed coat, something she might wear for a moment but never truly own. She moved toward gate C27 as the loudspeaker announced final boarding for another flight. Across the hall, people hurried past, some balancing coffee cups, others cradling children or checking messages. Rachel stepped aside once to let a family of 4 shuffle through, their twin boys arguing cheerfully over a toy car. She found herself smiling. The small sounds of ordinary life always calmed her. At the gate, a cheerful airline poster promised first-class service, "Because you deserve it." The words made her pause. Did she deserve it? The thought brought back years of memory she preferred to keep folded away. Long nights in far-off places, work that required discipline and silence, tasks completed without applause. She drew a slow breath and joined the short line for premium boarding. The gate agent, a neatly dressed woman with a polished badge that read Karen, greeted passengers with the trained warmth of someone who spent long days doing the same routine. When Rachel stepped forward, Karen's eyes moved quickly from the boarding pass to Rachel's face and then to the gray hoodie. A faint crease appeared between her brows. "Good morning," Karen said politely. "May I see your ticket?" Rachel handed it over. "Good morning," Karen scanned the pass. The screen beeped in confirmation, but her frown deepened. "This line is for first class." "Yes, I know," Rachel answered, keeping her voice even. Karen hesitated, her gaze flicking again over Rachel's clothes. The scuffed backpack, the plain sneakers. "There may be a small error," she said finally. "Would you mind stepping aside for a moment while we check?" The businessman behind Rachel shifted impatiently, the leather of his briefcase squeaking as he adjusted it. A sigh escaped someone else in line. Rachel felt the familiar quietness settle inside her, a calm she had practiced for years, the kind that arrived before storms or difficult decisions. She stepped aside without a word. Karen consulted a second agent at the podium, their voices low but not quite low enough. Rachel heard fragments: "overbooked," "upgrade waitlist." "Are you sure?" She watched the flow of passengers boarding, noting details out of habit. The nervous teenager double-checking her seat, the elderly couple moving carefully down the jet bridge, the tall man who seemed to be searching for someone. Observing without judgment had become second nature. After a minute, Karen returned, her expression apologetic but firm. "I'm very sorry, Ms. Morgan, there's been a reassignment. We'll need to place you in economy, row 23. You'll still arrive at the same time, of course, and we can offer a beverage voucher." Rachel looked at the ticket in Karen's hand. A younger version of herself might have argued. But she had spent years learning when to save her breath. "That's fine," she said quietly. Karen seemed surprised by the lack of protest. "Thank you for understanding," she murmured, printing a new boarding pass. Rachel accepted it with a small nod. She turned toward the economy line. As she adjusted her backpack, the strap slipped slightly, tugging the hoodie off one shoulder. It was a tiny motion, quick and unplanned. But in that second, a piece of inked history revealed itself. A black trident entwined with an eagle's wings. It was not a decorative tattoo. To the trained eye, it spoke of years of service, intense preparation, and missions that never reached the newspapers. Most travelers around her didn't notice. A child tugged at his mother's coat, a man checked his watch. But a few rows away, someone did notice. Captain Michael Reynolds, the flight's pilot, had stepped briefly onto the jet bridge to confer with a crew member about a mechanical reading. He had logged thousands of hours in the air, but he still made a habit of walking the cabin before takeoff. It helped him read the mood of the flight, something no instrument panel could measure. As he approached the gate area, his practiced eyes scanned the waiting crowd. That was when he saw it, the flash of a trident and eagle, unmistakable even in the harsh fluorescent light. The emblem was small, placed high enough on the back that it showed only when clothing slipped. But for Michael, who had spent years flying missions for the Navy before moving to commercial aviation, the sight landed like a sudden gust. He froze mid-step. He knew exactly what that mark meant. It belonged to someone who had trained in ways few civilians could imagine. Someone who understood precision, endurance, and quiet courage. The emblem carried stories of ocean nights, of teammates and discipline, of operations where silence was survival. It was not a symbol worn lightly. Michael's mind flicked back to his own service days, shared airfields, whispered rumors of teams that went where even pilots could not follow. He felt a pulse of recognition, almost respect. What was someone with that background doing in a gray hoodie, calmly accepting a downgrade without a word? He stepped back from the jet bridge, watching as Rachel moved toward the coach entrance unhurried, her expression unreadable. She gave no sign that she had noticed his stare. Meanwhile, Rachel found her place in the slower line for economy. She could feel the slight chill on her shoulder where the hoodie had slipped, but she did not reach to pull it up. Let them look if they wanted. She had nothing to explain. As the line shuffled forward, she let her thoughts drift to the reason for the trip. Boston. A reunion of sorts, though not the cheerful kind. An old teammate, one of the few people who truly understood her, was receiving an award for community service after years of quiet work helping veterans. He had insisted she come. "You'll see old friends," he had said. "It's time." She wasn't sure she agreed, but she had promised, and she kept promises. The cabin door was now open. The scent of brewed coffee drifted out, mixed with the metallic hint of recirculated air. Rachel stepped onto the jet bridge, feeling the familiar vibration of engines powering the aircraft's systems. She glanced once toward the front where first-class passengers were settling in, wide seats and small glasses of orange juice waiting. Behind her, Captain Reynolds re-entered the bridge from the side door, his uniform crisp, his eyes thoughtful. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone used to command. Yet there was a new alertness in his step. Rachel found her seat, row 23, a middle seat between a college student wearing headphones and a grandmother with a bright floral scarf. She placed her bag beneath the seat and sat without complaint. The grandmother offered a kind smile. "Traveling to Boston too?" she asked. "Yes," Rachel said simply. The student bobbed his head to music only he could hear. Outside the window, ground crew moved like figures in a slow dance, guiding luggage carts and checking the wings. As passengers settled, the pilot's voice came over the intercom, steady and professional. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Reynolds. We'll be departing shortly for Boston, with an estimated flight time of 3 hours and 10 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The words were routine, but she sensed something different in the tone, a faint hesitation. Maybe it was only her imagination, or maybe the captain had seen more than she intended to reveal. Up front, Michael Reynolds placed the microphone back in its cradle. His co-pilot glanced at him. "Everything good?" "Yes," Michael said, though his mind was elsewhere. He kept picturing the trident and eagle, the quiet strength of the woman who wore it. Something told him this was no ordinary passenger, and something deep inside urged him to find out more, if only to make sure the airline had not made a mistake with someone who had once carried a nation's trust. The seatbelt sign chimed. Engines rumbled to life. Rachel opened her eyes and gazed out the window as the plane began its slow pushback from the gate. She felt the familiar mix of calm and anticipation that flying always brought. Whatever the hours ahead held, she was ready. The airplane lifted smoothly into a pale Texas sky, its wings slicing through thin morning clouds. Seatbelt lights glowed overhead as passengers settled into a quiet rhythm. A soft hiss of air drifted through the cabin while the engine's steady hum became the background music of travel. Rachel Morgan sat upright in seat 23B, hands folded loosely in her lap. Years of practice kept her posture relaxed but alert. To anyone watching, she looked like an ordinary traveler who had already forgotten the boarding confusion. Inside, her mind moved in careful layers, checking details, mapping exits, noting the mood of those around her. Old habits never left, even when the work was long behind her. The college student beside her dozed with headphones still in place, his playlist whispering a faint beat. On the aisle side, the grandmother in the floral scarf began knitting with slow, patient motions. Now and then she smiled at Rachel, a warm gesture that asked for nothing. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisle, offering drinks and small bags of pretzels. Rachel declined politely, choosing instead to sip water from the bottle she always carried. She enjoyed the small comfort of routine, the quiet clink of ice in plastic cups, the murmur of passengers requesting coffee or tea. Far ahead in the cockpit, Captain Michael Reynolds kept his attention on the instruments. Yet his thoughts drifted toward row 23. The brief glimpse of the Navy SEAL Trident earlier had stayed with him like an unfinished sentence. He had flown countless flights, meeting veterans and service members of every branch, but the emblem was rare, especially on a passenger who carried herself with such quiet ease. He recalled the years before his commercial career, when he had flown transport planes for the Navy. SEAL teams sometimes boarded his aircraft for silent late-night flights. They spoke little, but their presence filled the cabin with a calm strength. Michael had always admired that discipline. Now seeing the same emblem on a woman who accepted a downgrade without complaint stirred something deeper than curiosity. Respect, yes, but also a sense that a story was unfolding in the seat map of his own plane. After reaching cruising altitude, Michael stepped out of the cockpit for his customary walk through the cabin. Officially, it was to greet passengers and check on the crew. Unofficially, he wanted a closer look at the woman in gray. He moved slowly down the aisle, exchanging polite nods and small words. People looked up, surprised but pleased to see the captain in person. When he reached row 23, he paused. "Good morning," he said with a warm, professional smile. Rachel looked up, her expression neutral but friendly. "Good morning, Captain. Everything comfortable back here?" His tone was casual, but his eyes held a quiet recognition, a pilot's way of saying, "I know something about you," without speaking the words. "Yes, thank you," she replied. Her voice was even, neither eager nor cold. Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second. "If you need anything, please let the crew know," he added, then continued down the aisle as if nothing more had passed between them. Yet as he walked away, he felt the weight of her steady gaze following him for a heartbeat. Rachel watched him disappear toward the front of the plane. She could tell when someone noticed the tattoo. Their eyes always paused, questioning, but the captain's glance held no judgment, only understanding. That surprised her more than she cared to admit. Hours stretched gently across the sky. The grandmother beside Rachel began a quiet conversation, asking if Rachel was visiting family. Rachel offered a simple truth. "I'm going to see an old friend," she said. She left it there, knowing more words would invite questions she wasn't ready to answer. The older woman nodded kindly. "Friends are family too," she said, and returned to her knitting. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Yes, friends could be family, especially the ones who had stood beside her through nights of wind and uncertainty. She thought of the reunion in Boston, of familiar faces she had not seen in years, of the teammate receiving an award for helping veterans find their footing in civilian life. He had written in his invitation, "We built something together. Come see how it continues." She wondered if he still carried the same quiet humor that once kept their group grounded. A light chime interrupted her thoughts. The seatbelt sign blinked on as a soft voice announced mild turbulence ahead. The plane trembled slightly, nothing serious. Rachel rested her hand on the armrest, steady and calm. The student beside her slept on, unaware. Up front, Michael adjusted the controls with practiced ease. He felt the gentle bump of air currents and guided the aircraft with small, precise movements. Still, his mind circled back to the passenger in 23B. He wondered what missions had etched that emblem into her skin, what choices had led her to sit unnoticed among ordinary travelers. Perhaps, he thought, she wanted exactly that, anonymity after years of demands. When the ride smoothed and the sign turned off, Michael left the cockpit again, this time with a quiet plan. He stopped near the flight attendant's galley and spoke softly to Angela, the lead attendant. "There's a passenger in 23B, name's Rachel Morgan," he said. "Would you mind offering her a complimentary snack or drink?" Just make sure she's comfortable. Angela raised an eyebrow, curious. Special reason? Michael offered a small smile. Let's call it professional courtesy. Angela, experienced enough not to pry, nodded and prepared a tray with care. Back in her seat, Rachel accepted the gesture with polite surprise. That's very kind, she said when Angela explained it was from the captain. She thanked her quietly and sipped the hot tea, feeling an unexpected warmth not from the cup, but from the recognition she hadn't sought. The rest of the flight passed in a calm rhythm, clouds drifting below like soft fields, passengers reading or sleeping, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Rachel allowed her thoughts to wander toward the coastline of Massachusetts, toward the gathering of old teammates who would greet her with stories and memories. She wondered if they would notice how much she had changed, or how much she hadn't. As the announcement for descent came, the cabin filled with the subtle rustle of passengers preparing to land. Michael's voice again carried through the speakers, steady and reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our approach into Boston shortly. Weather is clear, and we expect a smooth landing. Thank you for flying with us today. Rachel tightened her seatbelt and glanced out the window. Below, the Atlantic shimmered in early afternoon light. For a brief moment, she felt the same quiet excitement she had known on distant runways years ago, when every landing meant another mission completed. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the engines wash over her. Whatever awaited in Boston, old friends, memories, perhaps unexpected questions, she felt ready. And though she had no way of knowing, the captain up front felt the same quiet anticipation. Sensing that their brief exchange was only the beginning of a story neither of them had planned. The wheels touched the runway with a soft thump, a gentle reminder that the long flight was over. Afternoon sunlight poured through the windows as the plane slowed across the wide Boston tarmac. Passengers stirred, stretching arms and gathering belongings, their voices carrying the hopeful energy of arrival. Rachel Morgan stayed seated until the first wave of travelers moved forward. She preferred unhurried exits, letting the crowd thin before standing. The grandmother beside her folded her knitting and gave a kind farewell. "Safe trip, dear," she said. "Thank you," Rachel replied with a warm nod. When it was her turn, Rachel eased into the aisle, her gray hoodie falling naturally across her shoulders. The college student behind her yawned, clearly still half asleep. The familiar sense of warm engines and airport air greeted her as she stepped onto the jet bridge. Captain Michael Reynolds waited just beyond the open cockpit door, speaking quietly with a crew member. As Rachel passed, their eyes met. He offered a small, respectful smile. "Ms. Morgan," he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Welcome to Boston. I hope the flight was comfortable." Rachel inclined her head slightly. "It was. Thank you, Captain." There was a beat of silence, the kind that carried more meaning than words. Michael wanted to ask about the emblem he had seen earlier, but years of service taught him to respect privacy. He settled on a simple farewell. "Enjoy your stay." Rachel gave a brief, courteous smile and continued down the bridge. The terminal bustled with midday travelers. Overhead signs pointed toward baggage claim and ground transportation. Rachel moved with quiet purpose, her single carry-on sliding smoothly behind her. She had no checked luggage, no need to wait. Old habits favored efficiency. Outside, a crisp autumn breeze greeted her. Boston's air held the faint salt of the harbor and the warmth of late-day sun. She paused to breathe it in, remembering other coastlines where the scent of ocean meant something different. Nights of planning, dawns of careful movement. Here the same air felt gentler. A familiar voice called her name. "Rachel!" She turned to see Mark Collins, tall and broad-shouldered, striding across the pickup lane. Time had added silver to his hair but not dulled his easy grin. Mark had been part of the same close-knit Navy group years ago, a teammate who had shared long hours of training and quiet trust. "You made it," he said, pulling her into a brief but strong hug. "Wouldn't miss it," Rachel replied. Mark stepped back, his eyes scanning her as if to make sure she was real. "You look exactly the same," he said. "Maybe a little more Boston weather ready," Rachel smiled. "And you look like someone who's been running community projects instead of obstacle courses." He laughed, a sound rich with old camaraderie. "Guilty, come on, the car's right outside. We'll get you settled before tonight." They drove through winding streets where autumn leaves painted the sidewalks in red and gold. Mark filled the ride with easy conversation, updates on teammates, the evening ceremony, the small veterans center he now managed. His words carried pride but also humility, as if the work itself mattered more than any award. Rachel listened with quiet appreciation. She asked gentle questions, letting him tell the story at his own pace. Through the window, Boston's skyline glowed in soft afternoon light, the Charles River catching flashes of sun. "You still live by the water?" she asked when a break came. "Yeah," Mark said. "Can't stay too far from it. You?" "I move around," she answered simply. "Work keeps me traveling." He gave her a knowing look but didn't press. They had always understood each other's boundaries. That evening, the Veterans Center buzzed with warmth. String lights cast a soft glow over a gathering of old teammates, families, and local supporters. Tables held framed photographs of past missions, carefully chosen images that revealed camaraderie without exposing details. Rachel recognized several faces from years gone by. James Miller, still tall and steady. Linda Hayes, whose quick wit once lightened every long night. Each greeting was a reunion wrapped in laughter and quiet respect. Mark moved easily among guests, his presence both leader and friend. When the time came for the ceremony, the crowd gathered in a wide circle. A local official spoke of service and community, honoring the center's impact on veterans returning to civilian life. When Mark's name was called, applause filled the hall. Rachel joined the clapping, a quiet pride rising in her chest. She remembered nights when Mark had carried more than his share of weight, offering calm when the rest of them were frayed. Seeing him now, still serving but in a new way, felt like a circle closing. After the speeches, music played and conversations flowed. Rachel found herself beside Linda, sharing memories of long-ago training sessions. They laughed at old stories, their voices low enough to keep private details unspoken. "You still keep in touch with many of the old crew?" Linda asked. "Here and there," Rachel said. "Life spreads us out, but some things stay the same." Linda nodded thoughtfully. "You always had that quiet strength. Good to see you again." Rachel accepted the words with a modest smile. Later, as the evening softened, Rachel stepped outside for a breath of cool air. The city lights shimmered on the water beyond the harbor. She leaned on the railing, letting the quiet settle around her. Footsteps approached, and she turned to see Mark. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "Old habit," she replied, checking the perimeter. He chuckled, then grew serious. "I'm glad you came. We don't get many chances to stand in the same place anymore." "I'm glad too," Rachel said. "This center, it's good work, Mark. You should be proud." "I am," he admitted. "But it's a team effort like everything we've ever done." They stood together in companionable silence, the sound of the harbor faint below, across the city. Captain Michael Reynolds ended his own day with a quiet walk along the waterfront. His flight schedule allowed a single night in Boston before the next morning's departure. He often used layovers to stretch his legs, but tonight his thoughts wandered back to the passenger with the calm eyes and the emblem he hadn't forgotten. He didn't know her story, but something about her presence stayed with him, a reminder of shared service and the quiet ties between those who had worn the uniform in different ways. He looked out over the same harbor lights that shimmered near the Veterans Center, unaware that Rachel stood not far away, breathing the same cool air. Inside, music and conversation continued, but Rachel remained outside a little longer, the night air wrapping around her like a familiar cloak. Boston's skyline glowed steady and sure, a quiet welcome after years of constant movement. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply stand still. The next morning broke calm and clear over Boston Harbor. A thin mist floated above the water as fishing boats hummed out to sea. Rachel Morgan rose early, as she always did, and laced her shoes for a walk before the city truly woke. The Veterans Center was quiet when she slipped outside, the last of the string lights still glowing faintly against the fading night. She followed a narrow path along the waterfront. The cool air carried a faint salt smell and the distant call of gulls. Years of travel had taught her to find peace in small moments like this. Steady breath, measured steps, the rhythm of her own thoughts. She paused near a bench where the view opened wide to the Atlantic, letting the horizon settle her mind. Footsteps approached softly behind her. "Morning, Rachel," came a warm voice. She turned to see Mark Collins, coffee cup in hand, his easy grin already awake. "You're up early," she said. "Old habits," he replied, settling beside her. I figured you'd be out here too. Couldn't sleep much after last night. Big day for the center, but it felt even bigger seeing everyone together again. Rachel nodded. It was good to see the team. It reminded me of what we built back then, and what you're building now. Mark sipped his coffee, watching a sailboat glide across the quiet water. It's different work, he said. Less noise, but the same need for trust. These vets who come through our doors, they're carrying heavy stories. Sometimes all they need is someone to listen. You're good at that, Rachel said. You always were. He glanced at her with a small smile. So were you. They sat in companionable silence. The city behind them slowly woke. Taxis starting their morning routes, the smell of bakery bread drifting on the breeze. Rachel felt the pull of memories, missions and friendships, long nights when trust was the only compass. But she also felt something new, the quiet satisfaction of seeing life move forward. Later that morning, they met with Linda Hayes and a few other teammates for a casual breakfast at a corner cafe. The place smelled of roasted coffee and warm cinnamon. They gathered around a wooden table, conversation flowing easily. Stories from years past surfaced, training mishaps, small victories, the kind of shared history that needed no explanation. James Miller arrived late, his booming laugh announcing him before he reached the table. Some things never change, he said, settling in. Rachel, you still manage to look like you just stepped off a marathon and not a flight. Rachel smiled. Early walks help. The talk turned to the Veterans Center and the programs Mark hoped to expand. Job training, family support, counseling. Each friend offered ideas or connections, their voices carrying the same teamwork they once brought to distant assignments. Rachel listened, occasionally adding a thoughtful suggestion. Though she rarely sought the spotlight, her words always landed with quiet authority. Linda noticed and gave her an approving nod. You should come back more often, she said. You have a way of grounding everyone. I travel a lot, Rachel replied, keeping her tone light. But maybe it's time to slow down, at least a little. That afternoon, Rachel decided to explore the city alone. She wandered through narrow brick streets, past bookstores and cafes, enjoying the feel of Boston's history beneath her steps. In a quiet square, she paused by a monument honoring service members. Bronze figures stood in timeless salute, their faces carved with calm determination. She traced the engraved names with her eyes, sensing the stories behind each one. A small child nearby asked his father why the soldiers looked so serious. The father knelt, explaining gently that the figures represented courage and dedication. Rachel felt a quiet kinship with the sculpture, a reminder that service was not about recognition but about commitment. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Dinner tonight with the group. Waterfront Bistro, 7 o'clock. She typed back a simple, I'll be there. Across the harbor, Captain Michael Reynolds prepared for an unexpected free evening. His return flight had been delayed until the following day, giving him another night in the city. He decided to revisit the waterfront where he had walked the night before. The calm of the ocean always steadied him, and something about Boston in early autumn invited reflection. As he strolled along the pier, he spotted a familiar figure across the street, tall posture, steady stride, gray hoodie. Rachel Morgan. She moved with quiet purpose, pausing occasionally to look at the water. Michael hesitated, debating whether to speak. Their brief exchange on the plane had stayed with him more than he expected. Finally, he crossed the street. Ms. Morgan, he said, his voice respectful. Rachel turned, a flicker of surprise in her eyes that quickly softened. Captain Reynolds, she said. I didn't expect to see you again. Neither did I, he admitted. My flight schedule changed. Boston has a way of keeping people a little longer. They walked side by side along the pier. Conversation began with simple topics, the beauty of the harbor, favorite places to eat, but soon dipped into deeper currents. Michael mentioned his years of Navy service, careful not to press, but leaving space if she wished to share. Rachel considered, then gave a small nod. I served too, she said quietly. Different paths, same ocean. Michael met her gaze with understanding. I thought so, he said. That emblem. It speaks for itself, she offered a faint smile. Not something I usually talk about. I get that, he replied. Some things don't need explaining. They continued walking, the evening light turning the water a soft gold. The conversation stayed easy. touching on travel stories, favorite cities, even small bits of humor about life in airports. Michael sensed the depth behind her measured words but never pushed for details. When they reached the end of the pier, Rachel checked the time. "I have dinner plans with old friends," she said. "It was good to run into you." "Likewise," Michael said. "Safe travels wherever they take you next." They parted with a polite nod, each carrying a quiet respect for the other's journey. As dusk settled, Rachel joined Mark, Linda, James, and the others at the waterfront bistro. Candlelight flickered across the table as they shared seafood and laughter. Stories of the past mixed with plans for the future, Mark's hopes for a new wing at the center, Linda's idea for a mentorship program. At one point, Mark raised his glass. "To friendships that last," he said, "no matter the miles or the years." They clinked glasses, the simple toast carrying the weight of years spent apart and the strength that remained. Rachel felt a steady warmth inside. For so long she had lived between places, carrying memories like quiet shadows. Tonight, surrounded by old friends and the sound of the harbor outside, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: belonging. Back at her room later that night, Rachel opened the window to let in the cool ocean air. Lights from the harbor shimmered like scattered stars. She thought of the captain who had recognized a symbol few noticed, of the teammates who still stood beside her after all these years, of the quiet path that had brought her here. For the first time in many months, she allowed herself a small, contented sigh. The world beyond the window was wide and uncertain, but in this moment, she felt steady and whole. The following morning dawned pale and quiet over Boston Harbor, the kind of day when the air feels almost weightless. Rachel Morgan woke before her alarm, as she often did, and watched a band of early sunlight slide across the wall of her guest room at the Veterans Center. She liked mornings like this. No rush, only the steady beat of her own breath and the faint sound of gulls beyond the window. The previous night's dinner still warmed her thoughts. Sitting with Mark, Linda, James, and the others had reminded her how strong friendships could remain, even when years and miles intervened. Yet beneath that comfort, she sensed a question she had carried for a long time. A question about what came next. For years she had lived like a traveler between worlds, part civilian, part something else entirely. The Veterans Center had stirred something she hadn't expected. It felt like a quiet invitation. Rachel dressed in a soft sweater and jeans and made her way to the small kitchen where Mark was already brewing coffee. He looked up with a grin. "You're an early riser. Some things never change." "Old habits," she said, echoing his words from yesterday. He poured her a mug and leaned against the counter. "You disappeared pretty quickly after dinner. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she said. "I just needed a little quiet after all the talk." Mark studied her for a moment. "You've always liked quiet, but I can tell something's on your mind." Rachel gave a small shrug. "Maybe I'm just thinking about what comes next. I've been moving for so long, one project then another. Sometimes I wonder if I should stay in one place for a while." Mark's expression softened. "You'd be welcome here, you know. We could use someone with your steadiness. Not just for the center, for the people. You have a way of making others feel safe." His words settled in the air. Rachel didn't answer right away. She liked the idea more than she had expected, but she also knew decisions like this deserved time. Later that morning, the group planned a short trip to a nearby coastal park. They drove in 2 cars, laughing about who would handle the picnic supplies. Rachel rode with Linda, the city giving way to rolling stretches of autumn trees. The park greeted them with crisp air and wide trails that wound toward the ocean. They spread blankets on a grassy rise overlooking the water. Mark unpacked sandwiches, Linda passed around fresh fruit, and James poured lemonade into paper cups. The conversation stayed light, funny memories of training days, the small joys of civilian life. Rachel listened more than she spoke, enjoying the familiar rhythm of friends who trusted each other without needing constant words. After lunch, Linda suggested a walk to the lighthouse at the far end of the trail. Rachel and Mark volunteered, their steps falling naturally in sync. Leaves rustled underfoot, and the distant crash of waves filled the quiet spaces. Mark glanced at her. "I meant what I said this morning. We could use you here." Rachel looked out at the ocean. "It's tempting," she admitted, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to stay anywhere yet." You don't have to decide now, Mark said gently. Just know there's a place for you. They reached the lighthouse, its white tower catching the sunlight. For a long moment they stood side by side, watching the endless blue stretch of water. Rachel felt a calm she hadn't known in years. That evening brought another unexpected meeting. Captain Michael Reynolds, enjoying a rare second day in Boston due to scheduling changes, decided to visit the Veterans Center. During his morning jog along the harbor, he had passed a notice about the award ceremony and the work being done there. Something about it tugged at him, perhaps the memory of the quiet passenger who had carried herself with such quiet authority. By late afternoon, he found himself at the center's modest entrance. A volunteer greeted him warmly and gave a brief tour. The halls held photographs of community projects, tutoring programs, job fairs, family gatherings. Michael felt a familiar respect for the kind of service that continued long after uniforms were folded away. As he stepped into the main hall, he caught sight of Rachel speaking with a small group of visitors. She turned and their eyes met. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a calm smile. "Captain Reynolds," she said as he approached. "Boston keeps us crossing paths." "Seems that way," he replied. "I hope I'm not intruding. I heard about the center and wanted to see it." "You're welcome here," she said simply. Mark joined them, shaking Michael's hand when Rachel introduced him. Conversation flowed easily. Michael shared brief stories of his years flying for the Navy, careful to keep details light. Mark explained the center's mission and the progress they hoped to make. Rachel mostly listened, watching the two men find common ground in their quiet understanding of service. When a volunteer called Mark to another room, Michael and Rachel remained near a display of photographs. He looked at her with quiet curiosity. "You do important work here. I'm just visiting," she said. "Old friends?" "Still," he said. "I can see it suits you." Rachel tilted her head, amused. "You read people quickly for a pilot," Michael smiled. "Pilots read everything quickly. Weather, instruments, people. Comes with the job." They walked slowly through the hall, pausing at a wall of names honoring local veterans. The gentle murmur of voices filled the background. "Do you ever miss it?" Michael asked softly. Rachel considered the question. "Parts of it," she said. "The teamwork. The sense of purpose. Not the long absences, though." "You?" "Same," he admitted. "Flying for the Navy was different from commercial routes. But I like helping people get where they need to go. There's a quiet purpose in that, too." Their eyes met with a shared understanding. Different paths, same commitment. That night, Mark hosted a small gathering at a nearby rooftop cafe for the friends who remained in town. Michael, after a polite invitation, decided to join. The evening air carried a gentle chill, and the city lights glittered across the harbor. The group welcomed Michael easily, sensing his quiet respect for their shared background. Conversation drifted from light jokes to thoughtful reflections about service and community. Michael listened more than he spoke, intrigued by the bond among these friends. At one point, Linda leaned toward Rachel with a smile. "It feels like the old days, doesn't it? Everyone together again." Rachel nodded, feeling the truth of it. Mark raised a glass. "To unexpected reunions," he said. The toast was met with warm laughter. As the evening grew later, Michael and Rachel found themselves standing near the railing. The city spread like a constellation beyond them. "I didn't expect to see you again after the flight," Rachel said. "Neither did I," Michael replied, "but I'm glad I did." A comfortable silence settled. Rachel looked out at the water, remembering countless nights when she had stood on distant shores watching stars over different oceans. For the first time in a long while, the view felt less like a reminder of departure and more like an invitation to stay. "You seem at home here," Michael said. "I might be," Rachel admitted quietly. "It's something I'm still figuring out." He nodded. "Sometimes the hardest mission is deciding where to land." His words hung gently between them, carrying more meaning than either of them expected. When the gathering finally broke up, Mark clasped Rachel's shoulder. "We're meeting tomorrow to talk about plans for the center's new programs. No pressure, but we'd love your input." "I'll be there," Rachel said. Walking back to the center under the starlit sky, she felt a steady warmth inside. The city lights reflected on the harbor, a quiet reminder that not every journey required constant motion. Sometimes the next step was not another departure but the simple choice to remain. That night, Rachel opened the window of her guest room and let the cool air sweep in. She thought about the day, the peaceful walk with Mark, the surprising visit from the captain, the laughter of old friends. The life she had known, discipline, travel, silent missions, had given her strength. But this new life, with its small moments of connection and possibility, offered something she hadn't known she needed. For the first time in many years, she felt a sense of arrival, not at an airport or a distant base, but at a place within herself, a place where belonging did not require uniforms or long nights away, a place where she could simply be Rachel. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle sounds of the harbor. Somewhere beyond the dark water, planes traced quiet paths across the night sky. For once, she felt no urge to follow. The next morning arrived soft and golden, with sunlight spilling gently across Boston Harbor. Rachel Morgan stirred awake earlier than most, a habit she never quite left behind. She rose quietly, dressed, and stood at the window of her guest room at the Veterans Center. Below, the harbor stretched wide and shimmering, gulls circling lazily above the docks. A quiet question pressed at her heart, one that had been forming ever since she had set foot in Boston. Was this the place she was meant to stop moving? Rachel walked down to the small kitchen where the smell of brewing coffee drifted warmly. She found Linda already there, humming softly as she sliced bread for breakfast. "Morning," Linda said with a smile. "You're always up with the sun." "Old habits," Rachel replied, her lips curving in a faint smile. Linda studied her for a moment. "You look lighter today. Something on your mind?" Rachel shrugged. "Just thinking about what comes next. I've been living from project to project for so long. Sometimes I wonder if I should stay in one place." Linda placed the knife down and leaned against the counter. "You know, staying doesn't mean giving up who you are. It just means choosing where you want to plant your strength. And if you choose here, you'd be giving a lot of people something they really need." The words settled in Rachel's heart like small, steady stones. She didn't answer right away, but the idea of belonging, of building rather than moving on, felt less like a burden and more like a gift. Later that morning, Rachel joined Mark, James, and a few others in the main hall of the center. They were reviewing plans for a new community outreach program. Papers were spread across the table, filled with notes about tutoring, job fairs, and family support activities. Mark looked up as she entered. "Good timing. We're discussing how to expand the mentoring program for younger veterans. Care to join us?" Rachel nodded, pulling up a chair. She listened carefully, offering small insights when needed. Slowly, she found herself leaning forward, adding more ideas, sketching notes on the papers in front of her. "Maybe we could partner with local schools," she suggested at one point. "Not just for tutoring, but for showing students what discipline and teamwork look like. It could give them role models." Mark's face lit up. "That's exactly the kind of perspective we need." The group worked for hours, the energy in the room growing stronger. For the first time in a long while, Rachel felt the same focus and teamwork she had once known in uniform, but now directed toward building, not surviving. When the meeting ended, Mark caught up to her by the doorway. "You belong here," he said simply. "I can see it, and so can everyone else." Rachel didn't reply right away, but she carried his words with her all afternoon. That evening, the Veterans Center held a small event to thank volunteers and supporters. Families filled the hall. Children ran between tables and laughter floated easily. Rachel stood at the edge for a while, watching the simple joy. A young boy tugged at her sleeve and asked if she could help him with a puzzle on the table. She knelt down beside him, guiding his small hands as they fitted the pieces together. His smile reminded her of a truth she had almost forgotten. Sometimes strength meant simply being present. As the evening wound down, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Still working on puzzles, huh?" Rachel turned to see Captain Michael Reynolds standing there, dressed casually but with the same steady presence. She raised an eyebrow, surprised but not unsettled. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Neither did I," he said. "But I couldn't resist stopping by one last time before my schedule pulls me away tomorrow." Rachel gestured to the half-finished puzzle. "Then you'd better help before you disappear again." Michael chuckled and leaned down, placing a piece neatly into place. They worked side by side for a few quiet moments before the boy's mother thanked them and led him away. The two of them walked slowly toward the exit, the night air cool and crisp. Stars glimmered faintly above the city lights. "You seem at home here," Michael said after a pause. Rachel looked out over the harbor. Maybe I am. It feels different this time, like I don't need to keep moving anymore. That's good to hear, Michael replied softly. You've earned the right to stop running. His words carried no judgment, only respect. They lingered together for a moment longer, then said their goodbyes with quiet warmth. Michael returned to his hotel and Rachel remained at the center, feeling the weight of choice pressing more clearly now. The following day was filled with small but meaningful moments, helping with supplies, speaking with younger veterans, guiding a family through the center's resources. With each passing hour, Rachel felt a sense of anchoring she had not experienced in years. In the late afternoon, she walked down to the harbor alone. The tide was rolling in, the water reflecting a sky streaked with orange and pink. She sat on a bench, breathing in the salty air. Memories of long nights overseas stirred in her mind. Missions in the dark, footsteps through foreign streets, the endless sound of waves against distant shores. But now, the same ocean that once carried her away seemed to call her home. Mark joined her quietly, sitting without a word at first. They watched the waves together until he finally spoke. You don't have to decide today, but I think you already know your answer. Rachel turned to him, her expression calm but certain. Yes, I do. That evening, the center held a small private dinner for the core team. Rachel stood as dessert was being served, her hands steady but her voice carrying quiet emotion. I want to say something, she began. The room grew still. For years I've been moving. New places, new projects, never staying too long. I thought that was the only way forward. But being here with all of you has reminded me of something important. Belonging isn't about uniforms or missions. It's about people, and I think it's time I stop running from that. Her gaze met Mark's, then Linda's, then James's. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. I'd like to help build this place and give back what was given to me. Applause rose gently around the table, warm and genuine. Mark's smile carried both pride and relief. You already belong here, Rachel, he said simply. The days that followed were filled with new purpose. Rachel took on a role helping coordinate mentorship programs, guiding younger veterans and partnering with local schools. She found joy in simple routines. Morning coffee with Linda, strategy meetings with Mark, laughter with children who visited the center. Her scarred hands, once reminders of battles long past, now became tools for building something lasting. Every so often, Michael sent a note from wherever his flights carried him. A quick message about the view from 30,000 feet, or a reminder that choices matter as much as journeys. Rachel always replied with a short update about the center, her words carrying a steady warmth. One crisp evening weeks later, Rachel walked alone down the harbor trail. The air was cool, the sky brushed with twilight. She paused at the railing, staring out at the endless horizon. Planes arched quietly across the sky, their lights flickering like stars. For the first time in years, she felt no urge to chase them. Instead, she felt anchored, firmly, peacefully where she was. She thought about the young boy and his puzzle, about the veterans laughing at dinner, about the families finding hope within the walls of the center. She thought about Michael's quiet respect, Mark's steady friendship, Linda's wisdom. Most of all, she thought about the tattoo on her back, the emblem that had once defined her. It was still a part of her and always would be, but now it carried a new meaning. It wasn't just a reminder of service past. It was a foundation for the life she was choosing to build. Rachel Morgan breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill her lungs. She was no longer drifting from place to place. She had landed, and in that landing she had found not just peace but purpose.